The 1980s continued the tradition of the Indianapolis 500, but with new faces and cars competing with the old guard. Number 10, the 1988 Front Row. By 1988, Team Penske had established themselves as the top team in IndyCar racing. During qualifying that year, Unser Sr. qualified at a speed of 215.27 miles per hour and would be on the provisional pole position. Teammate Danny Sullivan would then set a new one-lap track record of 217.749 miles per hour on his second lap and would have an average of 216.214 miles per hour, taking over the pole position. Finally, remaining Penske driver Rick Mears would go out and would have a first lap of 220.453 miles per hour, the first lap over 220 miles per hour at the track, and would have an average of 219.198 miles per hour to get the pole position. The Penske cars would sweep the front row, the first and as of 2015 the only time for a team to sweep the front row. Number 9. Jim Truman's final race. Jim Truman was known for forming the Red Roof Inn's hotel chain. He had previously competed in Can-Am and Sports Car Club of America races. In 1981, he sponsored Theodore Racing and Vern Chupan, who had finished in third place that year. The following year, his True Sports team began to compete in IndyCars full-time with his Can-Am driver Bobby Rahal. Between 1982 and 1985, Rahal and True Sports would win 8 races. In 1985, Truman was diagnosed with cancer, but would not reveal it for several months. Rahal would qualify in 4th place for the 1986 race. With 15 laps to go, he was battling with Rick Mears and Kevin Kogan for the win. On a restart with 2 laps to go, Rahal passed Kogan for the lead and would go on to win the race with only 2 gallons of fuel left. In victory lane, Truman whispered to ABC Sports reporter Jack Arute, "I can go now." 11 days after the race, Truman died at the age of 51. Number 8. The return of foreign drivers. Prior to World War I, several foreign drivers had won the 500, including French drivers Jules Gou and René Thomas, along with Italian Ralph De Palma and British driver Dario Resta. During the 1960s, foreign drivers from Formula One began to compete, including Jack Brabham, Jim Clark, Graham Hill, and Jackie Stewart, with Clark and Hill winning in 1965 and 1966 respectively. During the 1970s, the drivers were largely American. Italian Formula One driver Teo Fabi switched to Indy cars in 1983. He would qualify in the pole position and lead the first 23 laps, but would retire due to a fuel gasket problem after 44 laps and would finish in 26th place. Despite this, he would win Rookie of the Year for the race. In 1984, two-time world champion Emerson Fittipaldi was entered. He would qualify in 23rd place and would retire after 37 laps due to oil pressure issues and would finish in 32nd place. Another ex-Formula One driver who first showed up at the Speedway in 1984 was Roberto Guerrero. Guerrero would qualify in 7th place and finish 2nd, sharing Rookie of the Year with Michael Andretti. Guerrero would then finish 3rd in 1985, 4th in 1986, and 2nd in 1987. Fittipaldi would begin to drive for Patrick Racing in 1985 and would win his first IndyCar race that year. He would later win the Indianapolis 500 twice. The success of Fabi, Guerrero, and Fittipaldi would lead to several drivers coming over from Formula One to compete in IndyCar racing, including world champions Nelson Piquet and Nigel Mansell. Today, the Indianapolis 500 is truly an international event, with 12 countries being represented in the 2015 race, including winner Juan Pablo Montoya from Colombia. Number 7. Second-Generation Drivers. The Unsers and Andrettis are legendary names in racing. By the 1980s, Mario Andretti and Alan Bobby Unser had easily established themselves as legends. Meanwhile, another generation was working through the lower ranks. In 1983, Unser Jr. made his Indianapolis 500 debut with a 5th place start. In the race, he caused controversy by blocking eventual winner Tom Snever from passing his father after he passed the two of them under caution. He would finish 10th after running out of fuel. Michael Andretti, son of Mario, arrived at the Speedway in 1984. He would qualify in 4th place and ran as high as 2nd before finishing 5th, winning Rookie of the Year with Roberto Guerrero. Combined, the two have won 76 IndyCar races, including Unser's 2 Indianapolis 500s and 3 IndyCar championships. Number 6, the 1989 finish. Emerson Fittipaldi led a dominating 158 laps in the 1989 race. However, with 20 laps to go, he had to make a pit stop under caution, but would nearly stall the engine and get blocked by a safety vehicle exiting the pit lane. Meanwhile, second place Al Unser Jr. stayed out. Even if he would run out of fuel on the last lap, he would still get second, as third place Rob Wissel was 6 laps down. With 7 laps to go, Unser was right behind Fittipaldi and would take the lead on lap 196. On lap 199, Unser was behind lap cars as Fittipaldi attempted to pass him on the inside of turn 3. The two cars made contact and Unser would spin into the wall. Fittipaldi would win the race under caution, and Unser was credited with 2nd place. Number 5, the Bobby Unser passing controversy. On lap 146 of the 1981 race, Gordon Smiley and Tony Benhausen Jr. made contact, causing the race to go under caution. 3 laps later, leader Mario Andretti and 2nd place Bobby Unser made pit stops. Unser would get out first and take the lead. As Unser was on the apron below the white line, he passed 14 cars and merged into the field in turn 2. Meanwhile, Andretti passed 2 cars, although AJ Foyt claims he waved Andretti by. Unser would go on to win the race. Andretti's team, Patrick Racing, filed a protest, and Unser was penalized 1 position. However, Team Penske would file an appeal to the decision, and Unser had his win reinstated on October 9th, provided he would pay a $40,000 fine. 1981 would be Unser's final Indianapolis 500. Number 4, the spin and win. In 1985, Danny Sullivan received a message from his team. He thought he was told there was 12 laps left. However, there were over 80 laps left. On lap 120, Sullivan attempted to pass Mario Andretti for the lead in turn 1. Sullivan would go into the apron to make the pass, but would do a complete 360-degree spin as he re-entered the racing surface. Andretti would barely avoid the spinning car. Sullivan managed to get the car pointed in the correct direction and would get back into proper gear to continue on. During the caution period for the spin, both drivers made pit stops. On lap 140, Sullivan would successfully pass Andretti in the same area where he spun. Andretti would struggle afterwards as Sullivan went on to win the race. Number 3, the second 4-time winner. In 1987, Al Unser Sr. was replaced at Team Penske by Danny Ungais, who brought financial funding from music and film producer Ted Field. The team would struggle with the new Penske PC-16 chassis. Meanwhile, Unser was without a car to drive at another team. On May 7th, Ungais crashed in turn 4 and was forced to withdraw from the race due to a concussion. Unser became his replacement and would drive a March 86 C Cosworth DFX. Unser's car had been on display at the Sheraton Hotel in Reading, Pennsylvania before getting called for race duty. Unser would qualify in 20th place. On lap 182, Roberto Guerrero made a pit stop while leading 2nd place Unser by a lap. As Guerrero was leaving his pit stall, he stalled his engine. His crew would manage to get his car moving, but it would stall again. As this happened, Unser would go by to take the lead and then lap Guerrero. Guerrero would unlap himself with 9 laps to go and only had 6 cars between him and Unser on a restart with 4 laps to go. On the restart, Unser held off Guerrero to become the 2nd driver to win 4 Indianapolis 500s. Number 2, March dominance. During the better part of the 1980s, the March chassis was the chassis to have. The first March at Indianapolis was in 1979 when Larry McCoy drove a Formula One March 741 chassis. March would also build the Orbiter 80C chassis that Howdy Holmes failed to qualify with in 1980. In 1981, March would begin to actively participate in IndyCar racing. Brothers Don and Bill Whittington, who had previously won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1979, each drove new March 81C Cosworth DFXs, with Bill having the fifth fastest speed in the field. However, the driver who most clearly showed the potential of the March was Tom Sneva with Bignotti Carter Racing. Sneva would post the fastest qualifying speed in the field with an average of 200.691 miles per hour. However, since Sneva missed the pole round of qualifying when the original pole day was rained out, he started 20th. Sneva would lead for 25 laps before retiring with clutch issues after completing 96 laps. Following Indianapolis, Gilmore Foyt Racing would purchase a March and would win March's first IndyCar race at the Vanscoy Diamond Mines 500 at Pocono International Raceway with A.J. Foyt, which would be Foyt's 67th and final IndyCar win. In 1982, 16 Marches, a mix of 81Cs and new 82Cs qualified. Foyt would start in third place and would lead for 32 laps before retiring with transmission failure after 95 laps. The highest finishing March would be Sneva in fourth place. In 1983, rookie Till Fabi would qualify in the pole position with a new track record average speed of 207.395 miles per hour. Mike Mosley would qualify in second place in a March. In the race, Fabi led the first 23 laps and would win Rookie of the Year, while Sneva led 98 laps on his way to giving March that first Indianapolis 500 win. March would win each of the next 4 races. Several teams would struggle with the March 87C chassis in 1987, as Al Unser won the race in a year-old 86C. The following year, several teams that purchased customer cars from March would start buying them from Lola. Emerson Fittipaldi would finish in second place in a March 88C in 1988. March would only support factory Porsche and Alfa Romeo teams in 1989 and 1990, neither getting much success in Indianapolis, although Fabi did win the 1989 Red Fins 200 at Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course for Porsche, the final IndyCar win for March. Number 1, the 1982 finish. With 20 laps to go in the 1982 race, Gordon Johncock led Rick Mears. Earlier in the race, Mears nearly lapped Johncock, who was saved by a timely caution. Both drivers were running close together. On lap 182, Mears entered the pit lane for his final pit stop, but would rear-end Herm Johnson and would get 40 gallons of fuel in his tank, much more than he needed to make the finish. 2 laps later, Johncock made his final pit stop. His pit crew performed a time stop, getting just enough fuel in for the finish, and he was out much quicker than Mears was. Johncock had an 11-second lead following the stop, but the light fuel load caused his car to start pushing. Mears would get better handling with the heavier fuel load. He soon started closing at over a second a lap. Besides the top 2, there were only 6 cars running, meaning neither driver had to really worry about traffic. With 3 laps to go, Mears trailed Johncock by 3 seconds. As the 2 entered the final lap, Mears pulled alongside Johncock, but he pulled a chop block in turn 1, causing Mears to lose momentum. Mears gradually came back to Johncock. He would attempt a slingshot pass as they exited turn 4, but Johncock would win by 0.16 of a second. The exciting win made up for Johncock's win in the tragic 1973 race. However, the following day during the traditional victory banquet, Johncock's mother passed away. There were several changes to the Indianapolis 500 during the 1980s, but it was still the same race we all know and love.